Good morning, everyone. It is great to be here. I'm excited to start our second series of Go Live with you. We're so glad that you could join us. We are looking forward to a wonderful conversation today with Dr. Margaret Larkins-Pettigrew. And this entire series is really going to be amazing, some amazing women, and of course, Justin Bibb, a gentleman joining us during the series. And of course, we'll end with Dr. Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility. But today, it's really exciting for me to have the doc with us. She is, I think, just an amazing, amazing woman. I have gotten to know her over the years that I've lived in Cleveland. She is a citizen of the world, but she has so many dual citizenships in Pittsburgh and Cleveland. Her home base, her home hospital base is University Hospitals. She is an OBGYN. She is a Navy veteran. She is a founder of nonprofits on the globe. She is a committed leader in the space of racial equity and health equity. And she is an important voice in the United States around this work. And I am just so thrilled that she is able to join us today. We have had many conversations over the years, and this one is no different. And so I'm excited for us to be able to just talk about a number of things. But as I got up this morning, I realized that today is 9/11. And I thought about where I was that morning of 9/11 in 2001. Really at home, getting ready to travel the next day. I was living in Dallas, and it was, I just remember this feeling of overwhelmedness, is that a word? And disbelief. And so many of my feelings in this season have been parallel to that. And yet, I think it was an important time for our country. And I think this is an important time. And so, Doctor, I wanna welcome you and just ask you where you were on the morning of 9/11, 2001.
Wow. Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with Margaret, my Margaret, since we both have the same name, which means pearl, precious pearl. And just knowing her for these few years has been phenomenal. I have to ditto on how I feel about what she's doing, and just a mover and shaker in the space of trying to make the lives of all people better, but really a great focus on underrepresented minorities and people of color in the Cleveland community. I want to tell you a little bit about that trauma, and when we talk about what we feel right now, when we talk about the trauma that we're experiencing based on the two pandemics that we have in this country, I have to start by saying at that time I was in the military. I was stationed at NAS JAX in Jacksonville, Florida. But I have three wonderful sons, and so I can't tell you, many of you know how it is to raise an African-American son in this country, being concerned every single day that they may not come home. Well, on 9/11, I have one son, my youngest son, who was actually living in New York. And it's so complicated because here he is in New York. He's on his way. He was dancing for Alvin Ailey, if you believe that, for this. It was just phenomenal. He had this great experience. He was actually on his way, and he was actually living in Jersey, had to come into New York. And actually, what station did he have to come into? He had to come into the station that was right above one of the towers. And so when the when the actual attack happened, I was in the hospital actually previewing a video that during a class. The video had been turned off and the television was on. And as I looked up and I saw that there was these airplanes that were actually hitting these buildings, I thought, is this real? And the teacher continued to speak, and in the second one hit, and I said, "Oh my God, this is real!" And she turned it up, and then the alarms were going off everywhere. And because when you're in the military, of course, when there is a suspected attack or a national attack, you get locked down. The entire base is locked down. No phone calls go out. No phone calls go in there, because the planes are taking off, rapidly. And that's kind of, if you think about, that was what's happening in my space. So I couldn't make phone calls, use any of the lines to get out to call my son, who would have been coming in that early morning and actually changing trains there to head up to Uptown. And I said, if he's late, because it was around 8:30 when he usually, gets there. And then this hit about 8:45 around that time. And I thought, if he's late, then he's gone, because, it would happen. So I literally spent hours trying to reach him, and did not reach him until later in the day. And he was at a Y. He was at a Y. Think about that. Getting fed and getting, blankets and being taken care of there in New York. And he was fine. The trauma that I felt during the time that I was trying to find my son in a place where not only he had, in a country where he's lived his entire life worrying about being a victim, that now he may have been a victim of an international event. And when we found him, I tell you, the feelings that I had that he was alive and safe, I can't even explain. He did suffer post-traumatic stress disorder after that. Of course, many people did in New York at that time. He actually traveled uptown and stayed with some friends of ours. So it's so great to have friends everywhere in this country and in this world. And he slept there for 2 days and didn't go out. But for many months after that, could not be in crowded spaces. So that's my 9/11 story, which is just embedded in my heart. And I am so thankful to, the one who was truly in control of our lives, that he is here, alive, well, an obstetrician gynecologist practicing in California. That's my 9/11 story.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Just absolutely amazing. There's just so much in there. Just the trauma of our everyday lives when you are raising sons. And I do have 3 adults, children, and 2 are our sons, and our daughter. And that time was just so traumatic. And as you said, we are in a season of 2 pandemics here again, and the feelings are very similar for me as I reflected this morning. And hearing your story, it's a palpable feeling for me as you were talking around that anxiety and concern. And that's so much of where we are today. So thank you for sharing that. Powerful. And I just have to say one thing about Alvin Ailey. Just an amazing company, George Balanchine, who was a famous choreographer and director of a company, American Ballet Theater, perhaps, I believe, famously said that he did not believe that Blacks had the body type to be able to dance classically. And of course, Alvin Ailey would do so much to prove that wrong. And it's an amazing company, thrives today in New York. And I know at one point, the company, the benefits, the pay, and just the new building there in New York just really outstripped and outperformed the other white companies in New York and around the world. And it is an amazing, amazing organization. And what an experience.
Yeah, I was just so grateful that that was part of our lives. And then he went on to dance with Bill T. Jones and did international dancing, and then went into healthcare. And he went into healthcare because he saw the disparities in health care and health delivery, which is so interesting how we come back to this all the time, as health being kind of the focus of, you know, what makes us be, we have a very productive and a very, some livelihood. And so we are here thinking about this again, you know, this whole issue of the pandemic and the many pandemics that we've lived through.
I want to dig into healthcare a little bit and have you reflect on your years in medical school. At that time, you were already very steeped in nursing and at a very high level, and yet made the decision to go to medical school in Pittsburgh. What was that like? How did racism show up in those years and those experiences?
So I was pushed to go to medical school because of the macro and microaggressions that I experienced as a nurse, and also because of not only what I experienced, but what I saw or my patients experience. You know, I was a nurse during the time of HIV and AIDS, and I saw the difference in how people were treated. I was there when I worked in critical care. And so I was very, very much up close and personal with a lot of the decisions made that were not in the best interest of people who looked like me. Yet I had no power to make any changes. I had a voice that I would use, and a lot of times got slapped onto my hands. But that's what pushed me to say that medicine would give me the opportunity to have a voice, an opportunity to have some more autonomy in order to do some things around public policy and to really make sure people were educated as it relates to the need for quality care for everyone. So I went ahead and decided to go to medical school. My whole family decided to go to medical school because that's what happens. I had the opportunity of being married to a wonderful man. We had our children already, so I was in a position where I was very supported. Some people don't have that. Many underrepresented minority students don't have that. They all go to school with their families, meaning that the families are supporting them in any way they can. But many underrepresented minorities have to reach back and do many things for their family members while they're going through medical school. So their struggles are very, very different than a lot of people who are privileged. So my medical school opportunity came when I could come back home to go to University of Pittsburgh. And that happened to me. I was what they call a transitional student, someone who was older, who was coming back into the field. And at that time, many schools were not offering that opportunity. University of Pittsburgh did that because they had African Americans who were really looking out for trying to make sure that we were trying to narrow the gap, the disparity gap between providers, trying to make sure we have increased number of providers who look like me, because we had such a large number of people who did not get care from people who look like me. So this has been around a long time, and we have had issues with the pipeline for a really long time, but they gave me that opportunity. What they were not able to spare me was the significant macroaggressions and microaggressions that occurred at that time, many of them that are still occurring today, but not at the level that they occurred then. I was going through medical school during the time where we were collecting cans to really feed the homeless, you know, because that was the thing we did. And, you know, we'd come out of a class in our boxes that we were collecting the cans and would say, you know, cans for coons. You know, think about that, cans for coons, and how long ago that term was around, you know. The other issue was the whole impact of what our grading system was. Today, they have the same issues of subjective bias throughout the medical system. But it carries not only through medicine, but all into the residency programs and on. And I've been in that fight for a long time. I mean, I was evaluated and people would literally write things to say, oh my God, she's good, even though she's a Black person. And they would actually write that in my evaluations. And so we've come a long way as related to them writing that down. But I am very, very comfortable saying that that still happens in the minds of many people who are evaluating our students today, that bias is still there. Our medical students of color are still suffering those macro and microaggressions that really cause them the stress, the added stress that they don't need when they're trying to become physicians. So it's a different experience, it's a different world, but we still have a lot of growing to do in that space.
Yeah, my daughter is in school becoming a nurse practitioner, and obviously clinicals are a part of her world. And I can tell you that, she experiences that today and has to continue to fight that battle here in 2020. I know that we are conditioned, all of us, to really think about health disparities in a way in which we focus in on Black and brown people or Indigenous people and people of color, that there's something wrong with the people. And if we could just fix the people and figure out what is wrong with the people, the health disparities would go away. But that disparities are squarely the responsibility of the Black, brown, and Indigenous people. Mm-hmm. And we're slowly starting to pivot, and I am feeling the pivot, but it's just huge to be able to look at these systems of care and who's in these systems of care and understand the responsibility there that aids and enables health disparities.
So like you said, I really do think we're starting to pivot, and I've talked a lot about tipping points in the history of this country, and we've had many opportunities to actually right this wrong. Black is not a disease. And I know that when people begin to understand that the root cause of what happens to Black people in this country is because of the way this country was built. This country was built on structural racism that runs through not only healthcare, but through transportation, through every aspect of how this country is run. And that's very hard for some people to accept, especially people who have been a part of privilege for so long. But if we are ever to make sure that there's equality for everyone and that we do the right thing, that we really must take a step back to understand that that's who we are as a country. That's who we are as a people. And that is what has happened to this country, that the root cause of health disparities, root cause of health care disparities, which is also very different than health disparities, is structural racism. And, I'm happy to be at university hospitals where we have, intentionally jumped right in and said, this is not going to happen at a place where we are healing, because hatred is part of what happens when you think that privilege is something you should hold on to. I mean, university hospitals, has said, we need to call out white supremacy. And what does white supremacy mean? It doesn't mean that you're a Nazi. What it means is that you have had the opportunity to live a supreme life as a white person in this country, and that if we don't really embrace that and really begin to move to understand that the root causes of how we end up with multiple comorbidities in the Black and brown communities, and that being Black and brown is not a disease, and to get away from that. I mean, there's still textbooks around that indicate that that's the case, So we've come a long way, but not far enough. And I think that maybe this may be the tipping point. I pray this is the tipping point that really allows us to move into a space where we're looking at health disparities, healthcare disparities, and that we're moving the needle around health equity.
This is, when you said Black is not a disease, that just was piercing for me. It just was like, whew, just such a relief for me personally, Black is not a disease. And yet, as you said, the textbooks, the belief system is just so strong that that is the case. And it has been that way for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. There's a book that I highly recommend to folks in this space by Harriet Washington, Medical Apartheid. It is not a new book. It's been around.
Sitting right beside me. Yes.
Right, exactly. I want to say that, the book is maybe approaching 10 years old at this point. So it's not a new book, but it is really, really powerful. Maybe it's not 10 years. Maybe she did
I'm
it.
sure it's 10 years. I mean,
Yeah.
I read it many, many years ago.
But it is a powerful book. I will also say that it's amazing for me to read the work of Dr. King in a book that he wrote in 1963, Why We Can't Wait. He also, in that book, points to white systems in healthcare as a place where we must dig in, burrow in, and really understand how to dismantle and unpack the system in order to have better healthcare in America for everyone. And yet we are at a tipping point, and we cannot lose where we are in this place.
I wrote a short piece that, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I wrote a short piece a couple of weeks ago about righteous anger. And that righteous anger really came from King. And as he moved in and out of spaces where he was subjected to being imprisoned, and where, many of them were beaten and hosed, and he talks about righteous anger. And he talks about the fact that there is a place for righteous anger, to utilize righteous anger to arise above that in order to strategize how we use that anger in a very productive way. We used it during, the fight for women's right to vote. That was righteous anger, but it was anger that was propelled in a way that we could be strategic and that we could make change. So that when we think about what's happening in our world, we think about those people who are burning down buildings, and they say they're angry, there's a place for righteous anger, and that type of anger should not exist. And so, you remind me of King and his powerful place and stance when it came to healthcare.
Yes, very powerful stance around healthcare. And it's just an incredible roadmap. I know that so many colleagues have reached out to me, white colleagues, influential folks of influence who are in the philanthropic community, sit on boards, and they're really asking the question, what do we do? How does our role as white allies, how do we further this work? And I think it's an important question. And oftentimes we think that there isn't a roadmap, but I would say that that there is. And our ability to disrupt what we've been doing in the past is also an indicator of where we need to go and how we need to work. So what do you say to white allies that are wanting to know, number one, how do we impact the philanthropic community? How should we be thinking about this, particularly as it comes to racism as a public health crisis, which is a move that is happening in our city and our county here in Cleveland, Ohio, and Cuyahoga County? And also, how do we as board members, how do we impact boards of influence in this space?
So, I have to refer back to what King said, if not now, when? Because this is a time where we really do need our allies, our white allies, more than any other time that we have in the world. We have had multiple historical events that have happened throughout history, and we have never been able to do make any of the changes alone. And when we talk about diversity, we are not diverse if white people are not at the table. We have not been able to make any changes in the country if we have not had the allies of white people. And so my white friends, we always have these discussions about, the discussions that happen when Black people are not in the room. And that's where they have the leverage and they have the opportunity to really educate their other colleagues who are white. We talk about the philanthropic communities and of course, writing checks, absolutely wonderful. We need money, we need financial support to do many of the things that we do to make a difference. But at the end of the day, if that's all there is, then we're going to be right back where we started from. It is time that we really invest in educating ourselves, making sure that our colleagues, and we're talking about my white allies, that you continue to educate yourself about yourself and your allies and your friends about where we are with this whole issue of structural racism, because it's not just in healthcare, it's everywhere. And until we have a large number of folks who really understand where we were, not to blame or shame, but where we've come from, who we are as a country, and how we want to strategically change our country, then we will not make a difference. But right now, right here is when at these board meetings that we really have to tackle social justice in a way we've never tackled it before. We really have to be able to feel uncomfortable to talk about these things in those spaces where Black people are not. Because, as my white friends tell me many times, that there's still Black jokes that are being made. There's still, LGBT jokes that are still being made. Disabled jokes are still being made. But when it comes to in spaces where people are there of power, where you think that it should, they should know it's inappropriate. But it's in those spaces and in those times where they have opportunities to reach out and have these conversations with people who look like them, who may not want to do it in a room with other folks who, because they're uncomfortable about it. This is where they have the leverage to bring it to the boardrooms, to take it to their own institutions and their own practices, where they have to really talk about what does this mean for us internally and what does this mean to us externally as we interact and as we grow as an institution. I mean, how are we as white people, I'm talking to whites, how do we make this change? And that is by educating ourselves, educating the people around us, calling out people in a very uncomfortable but comfortable way where we can have continued dialogue. The dialogue should not be between myself, who people who look like me, and people who don't look like me. These conversations have to happen in places where there is key stakeholders who really want to make a change, a sustainable change. And that's more than writing a check.
I love, what you had to say, that sustainable change. And it really means getting into the nuts and bolts. I think for philanthropy, it is an opportunity to look at how funding is dispersed, being able to look at funding dollars that go to organizations that are explicitly doing the work of dismantling racism. When you look there, or require organizations, philanthropy has some muscle behind being able to push this issue and insist that organizations encourage organizations, support organizations that may not historically have thought of working in the space of anti-racism, begin to build that muscle as a part of the funding requirement. And this is part of the uncomfortableness. Yes. We're all needing to move this needle together. And there's probably not an area, this is not a healthcare issue, as you said, there's not an area that cannot benefit by understanding what it means to become an anti-racist organization, how to do that, what it looks like to go in and look at all of your policies, practices, procedures, and disrupt that through a racial equity lens and begin moving, forward in that direction. boards
Right.
have to think about when we hire a leader at some point in the future that does not have racial equity as a business acumen, that they are able to lead and operationalize equity in this organization for us. That is what boards and philanthropy need to be doing in order to support, moving this needle. I think,
Well,
go ahead.
I just want to give a quick shout out about that to GCP. I've been working with GCP, especially the Commission on Economic Inclusion, Brian Hall and Jenna Cheverine in that group. And now Debbie Reed is my co-chair on that committee. And I've been with them for some time. And I can tell you that the conversations that occur within that organization really have moved to try to make sure we are looking at all of our members, looking at bringing on more members in that area of business, and especially small business as well, as we really try to make sure that we're doing the right thing, bringing philanthropic dollars to small businesses and uplifting them. And I think that across the board, that has to happen in all areas, not only law and businesses and healthcare. And so you're absolutely right that they have the leverage. These are the conversations that are occurring in that organization that really has many, many members. And I think we're on the right track. We're on the right track in order to make some significant change.
I think a lot of times people feel as if they have to be an expert in this space in order to start a conversation, lead a conversation, and that it just isn't true. And if we all waited for the time in which we were experts, whether it was diversity and inclusion or the space that we're in, which is squarely an anti-racism space, we wouldn't get very far if we waited until that box said, we are approved as an expert in this space and can now speak up. But I think that fear, that anxiety holds a lot of people back because perhaps they feel inauthentic or afraid or concerned about the repercussions coming from others. I don't know. I think a little bit of all of the above.
But I think that people, I have some of my friends who say, I'm not responsible for teaching anybody about Blackness. It's not my, I can't do that's not mine, But I think that we are all responsible for making sure that we all become better, our better selves. And if there's an opportunity for any of us, whether we have any expertise or not, to be very transparent about who and what we are and what experiences we've had, and what positive experiences as well as negative experiences we've had, both coming from Black people and white people. I think that's where we start. We work beside colleagues every single day we don't know not a thing about, and sometimes don't care about what happens in their lives. But if we're going to change and we're going to make sure that we are moving this needle together, then we have to be very comfortable with being who we are, knowing who we are, and be very transparent about sharing with other people some of those things that affect us as individuals.
I am a huge proponent of doing the deep work internally as an organization. And I know that you are a strong proponent of that as well at university hospitals. And it's really exciting. I believe that your ability to affect change is only as strong and as powerful as the strength of your core, the internal work that you are doing. There's not a finish line that I've been able to see in this work. It's a continual unpeeling of the onion, but you are leading some really amazing work at university hospitals that I just am so excited about.
Yes, and I am excited as well. I can tell you that we have had so many of our leaders come out to say, okay, so let's really start looking at our own institution through a social justice lens. and let's peel that onion and truly try to figure out, how well we're doing or how poorly we're doing, so we can, then change direction if we have to. And I think it really takes being part of an institution that you really believe in the philosophy and the vision of that institution, but that they believe it also. Having something written down on a piece of paper that says this is what we're all about is just not going to cut it. And if you join an institution that does not really embrace what they have written as far as their core values, then you need to pick up and leave. I think university hospitals has really made a significant difference in my life, because they've allowed me to be visionary and to really to speak out about those things that I see in the institution that we need to change, that we can uplift as very positive things. And I think, there's still, the bunch of white men at the top, we always complain about that. Those white men at the top, if they have a heart to make a difference in the lives of everybody, that is what you want, because they may never change. There may never be enough of me to be in those boardrooms at 50-50 or even greater. But the fact that you have leaders who don't look like you, that are allies, that will support those things that make you better, them better, and the institution better, is what I found at university hospitals. Now, I know there's other places that have the same support. I pray there's other places that have the same support and the same opportunities to really dive into these issues around racism and doing the right thing at a level that we are.
It's so important to do that internal work. I just think that there's no way around it. And this is not a Band-Aid that we can put on the patient who's having a heart attack. We have to go in and really address this internally. And when that happens, it is exciting. It is messy, it's difficult, and yet it really, it's game changing to look at HR policies and practices, the way we onboard, the way boards build their guidelines and bylaws, and the way leadership begins to take accountability and understand the historical impact, the realities today, and how we need to think and act and do differently. And it begins the process of really of change management,
right.
Moving away from sort of a white supremacy status quo that has aided and abetted one group while leaving out whole swaths of people, and not just leaving them out, seriously damaging them by attributing criminality, laziness, pain management. I mean, on and on and on. Intelligence. This is a reality, and where we are in our country today, we don't need laws. We have such a strong belief system about poverty and Black people that are assigned to poverty, that we don't need laws to maintain.
Right.
So it's a deep work to go inside and do this.
And I think that the pandemic has really brought us to a point where a lot of those things have really reared their ugly heads and said, it's time for us to make some significant changes. I mean, I watched my system really rise to the level of a level that I can't even explain, about how they day in and day out was very, very concerned about, patients who came in, all of our first, line workers, and, how we take care of them, but particularly paying attention to what's happening in our Black communities, and really set out to say, we want people to know that we want you to trust us to come in if you're ill, if you have any symptoms, we really want to make sure that you understand that we're going to take care of you. And so understand that there's a pandemic, and at the same time we have the COVID pandemic, we have these other pandemics around what happens to Black men in this country and Black women in this country. And so to pull all that together really, really took a lot from a system that was struggling with how do we manage the healthcare of people who are very, very sick. And I think that this time has really given us an opportunity to do a lot and to really partner with our African American and our communities of color to make a difference. And I don't know if we're going to get to this today, but even on this, when we talk about the vaccine and how we as African Americans and people of color react to any kind of vaccines, almost flu season, and my patients tell me I'm not taking that thing, no, I've seen people who die from the flu. And I think about, what happens when people have this trust about something that could save so many lives, and Black people tend to sit back and say, well, we'll wait until, it's safe, but safe for who? Because if we're not in those trials and we're not in the front line of many of these things, we don't know what happens with people of color when it relates to some of these trials. And the only reason why I bring that up is because the vaccine, we were awarded a vaccine trial.
Yeah.
And, here at University Hospitals, we have an opportunity because we were selected to actually have people in a study that is we're really now at a level where it is very safe to use it on humans. And so we need people from our communities to participate in these studies. I'm participating, my husband's participating. I want to make sure that when all of the data comes in, that they have people who look like me represented to say, absolutely, this is safe for everybody, and that, knowing that this is not a Black disease and that all of the blood runs through all of our vessels the same way, we need to be about the business of trying to take care of ourselves as well. And that means at every level that we participate, that we go out and do all those things that we can to take care of ourselves.
But the distrust is, for so many people that look like me, is real. And it's been a layering over centuries and generations and personal experience that the distrust is built on. And I wonder, the ability for hospitals and systems to be accountable to that and have ownership is going to be important as we turn the corner to a new level of being able to trust. I think sometimes when I hear people saying that access plays a big role in communities of color, sometimes I think to myself, is it access, or is it the reality of this long real history of being minimized, being, not our symptoms not being taken seriously, our pain not being taken seriously, and all the data backs this up, that we are often not receiving the level of care that counterparts with lighter skin are.
Yeah. So when you talk about accessing care, so there's having access to care and then literally accessing care.
Yeah.
So just because you have insurance and have the ability to present yourself if you're ill, doesn't mean you're always going to access that care. And
That's
so
right.
What happens, and why don't people want to access the care? And that's where you're getting to, is that, if you feel that you are going to not be treated with dignity and respect, you're not going to access care no matter how much insurance you have. Okay. If you feel like that you're going to be subjected to those micro and some of those macroaggressions that some of our healthcare workers deliver. And when I say healthcare workers, I mean everyone in the system is a healthcare worker. From someone who works in the environmental services to someone who answers that first phone, they are all healthcare workers, and they need to see themselves as such. Because when they pick up that phone and answer that phone, their kindness and their ability to do follow through makes all the difference in the world to everybody. But to someone who has been disenfranchised for so long, a rude person on the phone who cannot give you follow through or cannot assist you, change is a game changer for you and for many people who look like me. And so when you talk about trust, you know, we have to be partners, and I'm talking from a physician standpoint. We have to be partners with our patients, understanding, accepting where they come from. We wake up every single morning being Black and trying to be Black in this country, right? And so that whole issue of not only when we talk about healthcare disparities, how did we get here with so many people who have hypertension, diabetes? That's very different than, because it's around the stressor that puts us in those places, than health care, right? So health disparities, and then health care disparities, those health care providers, that's everybody, that make a difference in how they serve you because of the color of your skin. And there's much documentation, as you said, that says that health care disparity is what would keep you away from a physician, would limit the trust that you have from a caregiver. And when I say physician, I mean I'm talking about all healthcare workers, because everybody is a healthcare worker when they're inside that system of healthcare, because they all make a difference in the lives of everyone. I live in a space of urgency, so because I'm an OBGYN, and my issue is that every life that I touch, every phone call I make, everything that I do can change the life of a mother and a child. And we all need to think that way about everybody.
Yeah, yeah. So powerful. Absolutely powerful. I totally agree. I think part of where we are today is beginning to always ask ourselves, how does racism show up here? And as Dr. Kamara Jones always says, you know, where is the thread? How is racism living here? How does it show up? What are the intended consequences or unintended consequences? And this needs to be a regular part of our conversation, regardless of whether we're talking about healthcare, and your points around access and accessing were so powerful. But this has got to be, we have to normalize these conversations around how racism shows up, and not be afraid to step in and dig through these issues in order to disrupt change and create new platforms of equity for everybody to be able to enjoy. The time is really flying by. You and I both share a passion around Ghana and the continent of Africa, and you are also in South America, in Guyana, doing amazing work as well. And I have to tell you that I have been fascinated to watch the COVID response in other countries. And you know, when I look at Ghana as an example that has, I believe, about maybe 31 million people, and then you look at the state of Texas with 29 million people, the number of cases it's just incredible to see, you know, several thousand cases in Ghana and hundreds of thousands of cases in Texas. And it is really we have a very different approach to how we think about our neighbor, don't we, here in the United States?
Oh, absolutely. You know, me, I'm very, very comfortable talking about Ghana. I feel like I'm an in-law. My son married a Ghanaian woman. I've been to Ghana several times. I've worked in the refugee camps there when they were like 30,000 or more people in there. So I mean, really have a very, very special feeling for the continent in general. But during this pandemic, I can tell you that my in-laws called me right away. And this is back in January, so where they had first, you know, started to really respond to this. They closed their borders very, very quickly. They have mandatory mask wearing, and that happened immediately. And they had penalties for not wearing masks, and their movements were restricted, of course. But I'm telling you, they did it right. They did the right things for everybody. And, they don't have this, this privilege where, I get to choose whether I'm going to do that because this is my right. And, I'm not, so what if I'm impinging on your rights? And I think that we have handled this so poorly, that it's just absolutely ridiculous. And the numbers, speak for themselves, and I can say on the continent, I have friends who can't travel to see their family members between different countries because their countries are closed. They are not moving, and they are taking the hit economically. We talk about that very seriously, but when you want to save lives, when you talk about how your economy is built, it's built on the lives of people who can be productive. But if you do something that you continue to lose lives, productive lives, and when I look at South America, in Guyana, where I'm working now, I follow what's happening there as well. They have almost 1 million people in that country, very small, and they have had 1,000 deaths, 1,000 deaths, okay? And I'm sorry, they've had 1,000 positive cases, and they've had 47 deaths. Now, you can imagine those numbers are probably skewed because there are people who live out in the interior who may be dying at home. So we have to talk about the challenges of being in a low to middle resource country. But they're doing all the right things. They close their borders. They have limited service as far as they have pickup for people just still trying to save some of their economy. And they have multiple challenges around resources, but they're doing the right thing to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to survive this until we have a vaccine. And so when we compare other countries, our African countries or South American countries and other places that are doing the right thing, we need to fix this because our numbers are going to keep growing and growing and growing if we don't.
It is absolutely fascinating to watch, and thank you for that. I am in total agreement. We've really got to get committed to wearing masks, insisting that other people wear masks, and get our arms around this for the safety of each other and young people and children and elderly, our economy. It is really critical. And when you see other countries doing it, you just have to, it just gives you pause around what is happening in the United States. Our focus and our desire to want to be, quote unquote, independent maybe is the word I'm looking for, is not serving us well. I want to ask you what you're reading currently.
Well, I have, believe it or not, I'm trying to get through White Fragility, and the reason why I keep stopping is because my friends and my sons keep saying to me, that book, that book's not for us. That book is, is not written for us. However, just like anything else, I want to know what the what's being told or what's being discussed with people that I live with and work with, and try to understand, how my white friends may be thinking. And so I'm trying to get through White Fragility, but I've also gone back to The Warmth of Other Suns. I want to reread that before I recast. And so I'm back to The Warmth of Other Suns again, which was, it's a phenomenal book, but a long read, but that's what I'm reading at this point. Both of those.
Well, The Warmth of Other Suns, an amazing, amazing book, and Isabel Wilkerson is just a talented writer and author. We had her here, as you know, in November of 2019. She kicked off our 400 Years of Inequity Summit to commemorate 400 years of slavery, a partnership with First Year Cleveland, where you are also very involved in infant mortality and maternal loss and the work that is happening there. And Caste is an amazing book by Isabel Wilkerson, Caste, C-A-S-T-E. I highly recommend that to everyone on the call today. I commend that book to you. And Doc, I look forward to you reading Cass so that we can talk about it. It is a book that I have been moving through slowly because it is so impactful on me. So much new information that I am learning about for the first time. I don't want to sort of give it all away, but it is just incredible, really shaking me to my core. And you know, a lot of time when I give talks, people ask me about the health disparities, and you mentioned, you know, toxic stress, and I will often say to folks, you know, let's trade places for 400 years. You spend the next 400 years at the bottom of the system being told you're lazy, crazy, criminal, you won't amount to much. Every system is stacked against you, will put you behind in every single category. Let's make that trade for 400 years and see how it all shakes out. So, and you know, just, you know, white fragility. I read White Fragility. It is, I will tell you, with the 21-day challenge that we have done the last 2 years, over 30,000 people across the country have taken our challenge here in Cleveland through other YWCAs. And white fragility and privilege is always the leading piece that participants come away with, want to know more about. And, you know, a lot of people say, you know, this white privilege, you know, isn't a thing, or what do I do about it? And, you know, Robin DiAngelo isn't the first to write about whiteness. Tim Wise, others have been in this space, but it's a hugely important topic. And I find a lot of value in the book, and when we talked about bringing her in April, you were the very first to say, let's do this thing. Let's have university hospitals involved. It's an important conversation, privilege, and we must dig into it because we've been so myopically focused on there's something wrong with these Black people. We're in this together, and we must dig in and understand privilege in a deep and authentic way.
So I'm so excited that she's coming up. She's coming soon, which is exciting to me. And that, you know, of course, you know, I looked at it again yesterday, and I'm definitely going to be there to make sure I clear my schedule. The other thing is that's so phenomenal is Angela Burnett, who's local, who talks about, we talk about toxic stress and what happens to people of color. My leadership team and my leads for the social justice committee, as well as Cliff Majarian and the you know, the people who are leading our ship, they asked to have her come and speak so they can clearly understand the biology of racism. She actually spoke yesterday, and I can tell you how phenomenal that was to have so many leaders who were on that Zoom and who had so many questions, and just, it was so empowering and phenomenal that leaders at that level wanted to clearly understand that what happens with toxic stress, and you know, how can we make a difference, and to make sure that we don't continue to subject, you know, people of color to toxic stress. So she's someone else who's local in our area, who I think that has done some wonderful research about toxic stress and what happens to those, you know, our telomeres, and what happens to cortisol, and all those things that as a scientist, you know, she breaks down to make sure that people who are not scientists understand.
Dr. Burnett is amazing. I enjoy her so much. She's an incredible resource, and I agree. The science of racism is absolutely fascinating. We've come to our hour. It has really flown by. It went so fast. This has just been wonderful for me. I always enjoy spending time with you. I just am so encouraged by all the work that you are doing. GCP, First Year Cleveland, around the globe in Guyana and Ghana, and what you do in Pittsburgh and Cleveland. And I am thrilled that you were able to join us today. We just look forward to continued conversation. Thank you so much for your voice, your bravery, your courage, your representation as a woman, as a Black woman.
Yes.
I honor you, and I'm just so thrilled that to be in this work right alongside you.
Thank you so much, and God bless you, my sister. Keep fighting. Stay in the fight. Thank you for having me.
So next week we'll have Cynthia Connolly with us, and she is amazing. We look forward to that. Bye, everyone.